That's awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed Mary Fawn's yesterday. She's one of my favorites. And today, we've got all students, like I said. Today we're going to start out, though, first period with faculty. And just a reminder that the Writers Week store is open through Friday, midnight on Friday. So all you last-minute shoppers out there, jump in and grab it. WritersWeekFHS.com is where you go, and you can pick up some great Writers Week swag. So go ahead and get on that. All right, so today we've got 3 teachers, all who graduated from Fremd High School. Our first speaker today is in her first year at Fremd, and her name is Brittany Seaver. She's in the Business Ed department. Please give it up for Brittany. Ladies and gentlemen.
Not well versed in speaking into a microphone, so are we all good? All right, hello everyone. I'm Mrs. Sievers, I'm the new business teacher here. And since I'm sure many of you don't know who I am, I wanted to take some time to introduce myself.
I'm putting it right outside the door.
First off, I am Fremd graduate, so I sat in those very same auditorium seats that you sit in right now. I went to the University of Illinois for 4 years, joined a sorority, graduated with a degree in advertising, a minor in business. After graduation, I moved to the city, started work at an ad agency, worked there for 2 years, and then after realizing my passion was teaching, I went back to school to get my teaching license, and here I am. If you're already kind of bored, I don't blame you. On the outside, my life seems kind of bland. What you guys might call basic. But there are a few things that most people don't know about me. They are these little secrets hidden away that I try to keep to myself, but that have snuck out of captivity throughout the years. Let me explain. As a kid, I absolutely despised odd numbers. 19, 31, 73. What kind of a number is 73? I hated odd numbers so much that I used to not be able to leave a room until the numbers on a clock ended in an even number. I would sit there and wait for 8:23 to turn to 8:24. I liked rooms that had clocks with hands on best because as a kid, those were significantly harder to read. And I could more easily convince my 10-year-old self that it was actually 8:24, but damn, those digital clocks were tough to beat. Those red fluorescent odd numbers mocking me right in front of my face. Leave, Brittany, leave, I dare you. But I couldn't. I was frozen. Not until that 3 tick-tocked into a 4 could I be released from my inner prison. Another thing I used to do as a kid was visualize my full name when I stepped out of the shower. I would slowly reach my right leg up over the tub, hovering it above the ground, my left foot balancing the weight of my body on the slippery white porcelain bottom, while simultaneously visualizing all the letters of my name, chunking the letters into sections to make it easier. B-R-I-T-T, Brit, A-N-Y-N-E, G-E-E, Gee, G-A-N, Gin. When I got on the first try, it was going to be a good day. Well, let me tell you, there are almost always complications. Sometimes I would be almost done with the last section. G-A and frickin' Sarah Mitchell would pop into my head, and I'd have to slowly retreat my right foot back, up over the shower tub, trying not to clip the bottom of my right heel on the tub, land both feet firmly on the ground, and start the process all over again. B-R-I-T-T, Brit. This would sometimes go on and on for full minutes at a time, me standing there freezing with my wet hair dripping down my back until I could get it right. If you're asking yourself what in the world is wrong with this lady, I used to ask myself that very same question. It's 9:37. Why can't I just step out of the room? Right foot, why are you coming back into the shower? Stay out there, bring the left one with you. I had always known something was a little strange with my actions, but it wasn't until 5th grade, my soccer team was in a 3v3 tournament, that I realized just how odd these actions were. Just as we were about to step out onto the field, my friend noticed me pulling my warm-up, up over my head, back down, over my head, back down, over and back, until I finally threw it on the ground next to my bag. Here was yet another compulsive action action I needed to complete 3 times before the start of every game. I know, 3 times, but Mrs. Sievers, you hate odd numbers. It doesn't make any sense, but none of this really does. My friend, bug-eyed and clearly disturbed, asked, what in the world was that? Mortified, I quickly lied, I got stuck, and I ran onto the field. And that was the first time I realized I have OCD. For those of you unaware of the condition, OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, obsessive compulsive disorder is a common, chronic, and long-lasting disorder which a person has uncontrollable, reoccurring thoughts or obsessions and behaviors, compulsions, that he or she feels the urge to repeat over and over. Obsessive thoughts. Refusing to step out of the shower until I can visualize my name. Check. Obsessive behaviors. Pulling my warm-up up and over down my head 3 times. Check. We have a winner. There's a movie called Sleeping with the Enemy that stars Julia Roberts. Julia's character, Laura Burney, is the victim of domestic violence. Her abusive and controlling husband physically abuses her every time she tries to get away. The husband, like me, has OCD. Now, he definitely has a more extreme case than I do, and some anger issues along with it, but nonetheless, we share a common condition. One of his OCD tendencies is to have all the food labels in the kitchen facing outward, with all the logos in perfect uniform formation. Eventually, Laura escapes her controlling husband, buys a home far, far away, and starts her life out on her own, throwing the groceries into the cabinets and leaving them wherever they may land. Total freedom. Until one day, when Laura comes home, opens up the kitchen cabinet to make dinner, and to her horror, the items in her cabinets are all facing outward in perfect uniform formation. The horror, the madness, run, Laura, run, is what you're supposed to say. I, on the other hand, think, you should have rotated that corn slightly to the left. And that's when I remember I have a problem. My OCD tendencies stem from my anxiety. Oh yes, I didn't tell you, I also deal with generalized chronic anxiety. This is pretty common in people with OCD. There's usually some sort of irrational fear that causes the OCD behaviors. I'm not exactly sure which one came first, or if they both just simultaneously appeared at the same time, but they definitely feed off of each other. They're 2 peas in a pod, like peanut butter and jelly, Lucy and Ethel, Selena Gomez and Taylor Swift. I'm talking connected at the hip BFFEs. I don't think that when you walk past me in the hallways, you're going to see me switching the lights on 3 times before I walk into class, or knocking at the door saying, Penny, Penny, Penny. For those of you that have me in class, I bet you've never even noticed any of my OCD tendencies. That's partly because I've learned to control them throughout the years, but also because most of my tendencies happen when I'm alone. Your brain is an incredible machine. And when I'm all by myself, that's when my brain has this fantastic power to hijack my thoughts and my body. I know it's crazy to sit in a room until the clock turns from 7 to an 8, but the disease is so powerful it completely consumes me. One of the most renowned and well-known OCD researchers out there is a woman that goes by the name of Rihanna. She published a piece called Disturbia back in 2009, and it goes a little something like this. All the thoughts in my head, don't want to think about it. Feels like I'm going insane. It's a thief in the night to come and grab you. It can creep up inside you and consume you. A disease of the mind, it can control you. It's too close for comfort, and I feel like a monster. Well, I don't feel like the giant deformed monster in Fremd. While I don't feel like the giant deformed monster in Frankenstein, I do feel his pain of sometimes feeling isolated, a social outcast. This thief in the night comes to grab me and control me when I'm left alone with my own thoughts. It maliciously transforms my rational thoughts into irrational fears. The disease has no bias, no discrimination, takes advantage of whatever opportunity it can to overtake my mind, my body, leaving me limp and helpless. But it doesn't always win. While keeping a busy schedule and exercising helps with both my OCD and my anxiety, being around people is what really sends all that negative energy away. People distract me from my inner thoughts that creep up inside me and consume me. People remind me that there's a life to be lived outside of my own head. People show me that life is worth exploring without fear and anxiety. While I can now confidently step out of the shower without my little foot dance, I still have my quirks. I still always put my right shoe on before my left. I touch my head 4 times with a brush before I actually start brushing it. I've had 2 panic attacks in the past 2 years. And on occasion, I'll find myself sneaking into the kitchen to rearrange all of the food in the cabinets so the labels all face outward in perfect uniform formation. Sorry, Laura. But here's what I've learned throughout my basic life. No one is basic. We all have issues. Each and every one of us here, including your teachers, the administration, your coaches, not Mrs. Zank though, she's perfect. But in all seriousness, we all struggle with something. Whether you've just shared it with the Pactatorium during Writers' Week, or it's tucked away inside the toughest lockbox in the deepest, darkest crevice of your soul. I have OCD and chronic anxiety. My friend struggles with an eating disorder. Another deals with financial problems. 2 others grieve over parents that have passed away. We all have our issues. But as corny as that sounds, that's what binds us together as one race of human beings. We all need each other in this world. And that's not humiliating, that's empowering. Knowing that others have struggled and succeeded and are there to take your hand when you need it. Don't try to fight these battles on your own, because the person sitting next to you may be struggling with the same demons. Each one of you needs the person you're sitting next to, and the person next to them, and the person next to them. And above all, I need you so that one of you can give me a friendly nudge out the door at the end of second period when the bell rings at 2:15, 10:15. Thank you. Now please give a warm welcome for Brad Graba.
Mr. Schaefer, I know why you wanted to switch order now. That's a tough act to follow. Goodness. All right, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brad Graba. I teach anatomy and physiology here. Shout out to my first hour class out there. That's the loudest they've been all year. And I also teach AP biology. I've been teaching here for 19 years. And I actually graduated from Fremd in 1994. I had the privilege of having Mr. Gary Anderson and Mr. Tony Romano were the original organizers of Writers Week as English teachers, so you would think I might have done this once or twice before, but no, I have not. If you're wondering what a science teacher is doing down here speaking at Writers Week, yeah, so am I. I think it's probably just because Mr. Anderson kept harassing me for the past few weeks that I finally just succumbed, said I'd do it. And of course they did put me on a shortened day here. Seriously, I am here though because scientists do write. And scientists write a lot, okay? Why do they write? Well, they write to communicate their findings to the rest of the scientific community and to the general public. Imagine if scientists didn't write. Okay? Imagine if Watson and Crick had discovered the structure of DNA and then kept it to themselves. What would your freshman science teachers have had to torture you with? Our understanding of the way inheritance works, of the way diseases such as cancer work, would be significantly less than it currently is. Personally, I do not write much. I'm busy, unless you count lesson planning. I'm busy writing lesson plans, I'm busy grading papers. I have 2 boys of my own, I coach their sports. I don't have a whole lot of time to write. Although I am going to read you one piece that I wrote recently for the American Society of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. Sounds fancy, but it's actually an article about teaching, not about any of that. What I do a lot of, though, is read. I don't read a lot of fiction. I was never one who was very good at finding symbolism or hidden meanings in things. That was just not something I was real good at. It's kind of why I went into science. If I do read fiction, it's usually Stephen King or something like the last fiction story I read called The Night Gardener. But what I enjoy reading instead, I enjoy reading books about science. Books like The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Have any of you read this book? No. Thank you, Mrs. Enk. It is an excellent read. It's a story about a poor tobacco farmer from the South who went to Johns Hopkins University with pain in her abdomen that turned out to be ovarian cancer. The doctors took a sample of her tumor in 1951 without telling her they were doing it. And her cells are still growing in petri dishes around the world as scientists use them to study human cells and human disease. Her cells are worth millions of dollars. Yet her family was so poor when this book was written in 2011 that they couldn't afford health insurance. How's that for an ethical dilemma and real life drama? I read books like The Emperor of All Maladies here to learn about the history of cancer, including learning about the fact that there were stories written on papyrus by Imhotep, an Egyptian physician, in 2500 BC about some of his patients that must have had cancer. And also about the history of treatments for cancer, from the disfiguring surgeries that were done in the early 1900s to chemotherapy and other treatments that are used today that still make patients sick as a dog. This one, the reason I would have interest in reading this one is that my own life was touched by cancer in 2003. My wife died of pancreatic cancer about 10 weeks after our first son was born, and so I've had quite an interest in cancer. So reading about it was kind of therapeutic for me, kind of helped me understand it more. I also read books like The Sixth Extinction, a Pulitzer Prize-winning book about the science of climate change, so that when someone says something along the lines of, "It's cold today, where I live, therefore climate change is a hoax," or brings a snowball inside and uses it to try to disprove climate change, I can argue with them using actual facts and present them with actual facts to try and teach them about climate change. See, being scientifically literate in the 21st century as we try to combat the effects of climate change and overpopulation, as we debate the ethics of genetically modifying organisms and a myriad of other scientific dilemmas, is going to be incredibly important for your generation. And how can I help your generation and my students become scientifically literate if I don't read myself? So that's why I read, and I think that's why you should try reading something scientific every once in a while too. So what I'm going to read for you now is the article I wrote about a project I've done in my biology classes that some of you may have done, called Organelle Wars. It involves using Twitter in my classroom as an educational tool. Twitter, by the way, is another great resource for scientific information if you follow actual scientists like Bill Nye, Neil Tyson, and others. So this is just the article that I was asked to read that's being published next month in the American Society of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. It's called Starting the Organelle Wars. So, I'm lucky enough to teach at William Fremd High School in Palatine, Illinois, which is about 45 minutes northwest of Chicago. Teaching is a family affair for me. My mom was a third grade teacher for most of her career. My dad was a junior high science teacher and department chair at Jane Addams Junior High in Schaumburg. And my brother is a physics teacher and head of the math and science department at Crystal Lake South High School, also in the Chicago suburbs. The community, teachers, and students where I teach are proud of our school. We have a 97.1% graduation rate, and 84.3% of our students are college bound. The average ACT score of students at our school is 25, and most importantly, the students at our school are motivated kids who are fun to work with. The overwhelming majority of our parents are supportive and involved in their kids' education. I myself graduated from Fremd. Pardon me. I myself graduated from Fremd in 1994, and then was hired back to teach there in 1998 after graduating from Illinois Wesleyan University with a bachelor's degree in biology. In 2011, I was looking for a way to invigorate my cell organelle unit for my high school freshmen. The unit can really be a tough one to get students excited about. Am I right? Yeah. Okay. I had tried more cell organelle projects than I cared to count over 13 years that were aimed at multiple different levels of freshman biology. So like most resourceful teachers, I went to the internet to find inspiration. There I came across a project in California that piqued my interest. A teacher there had her students complete a project that involved campaigning for a cell organelle to be elected the most important organelle. I immediately fell in love with the idea of having my students run a campaign. The great part of the project was not only that students had to promote their own organelle, but they also had to run a smear campaign against 5 other organelles. Last election, we saw a lot of smearing. This requirement served the purpose of making sure that the students learned about more than just their own organelle. One of the other requirements of the project was that the students create extra campaign materials such as flyers, shirts, and bumper stickers, and here's where I added my own twist to the project. I encouraged the students to take their campaign to social media by creating a Twitter account for their organelle. Since the account was in the name of the organelle and not in the name of the students, I did not hear any complaints from students or parents about creating the account. In addition, because the use of social media fell into that extras category, students could fulfill the requirements for that category without using Twitter if they or their parents were not comfortable with it. The reason for adding this twist, the reason why I did it, was pretty simple. It's because I see you guys on your phones and on Twitter all the time anyway, so why not take my classroom there, right? So the use of Twitter did put the project over the top. Everything stayed within the small circle of students in my class in 2011, but in 2012, there was a presidential election between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, so students were kind of excited to be running a campaign. And on the first day of the project, one of my groups mentioned that someone they didn't know was tweeting at them, so immediately, of course, as a teacher, I panicked. I was like, oh God, who is this? But it turned out that the person tweeting them was a researcher from England who specialized in studying the Golgi apparatus, one of the cell organelles. Her name is Dr. Ann Osterreiter from the Oxford Brookes University, and she had been searching for information about the Golgi apparatus on Twitter when she came across my student's Twitter account. So here was an actual scientist going onto Twitter, typing in what she studied, and finding it, and finding my students. At that point, the project exploded. Dr. Osterreiter and her colleagues began tweeting with my students' organelle accounts, prodding them with higher level questions, and holding them accountable for spreading misinformation, and engaging them in a way that my students did not expect it from a freshman biology project in high school. So this year, the project was also interesting to see the number of made-up statistics that students would add to their tweets about the number of people supporting them, as well as the use of nicknames and monikers for their opponents. Not sure where they got that idea. So the Organelle Wars project has changed the way I approach teaching high school students about cell organelles. It allows my students to interact with scientists who are experts in the field of cell biology, and it holds them accountable for learning about their organelles. It injects an element of fun and excitement into my classroom that had been missing with other cell organelle projects that I had attempted. So, and that was the end of my article. So thank you very much for giving me a chance. Next is Mr. Eric Shepard.
Okay, what do we got left? How many minutes, Mr. Rose? All right. Okay, today what I'm going to be talking about tough acts to follow. There's some serious things here. This is a piece of fiction that I wrote after I did something really crazy when I was young. I'm just going to get right into it, and then I'm going to stop and hopefully... there it is. Can you guess what I did? Just shout out if you've heard of Running with the Bulls. Okay, not too many. Well, okay, not half. So anyway, any nice facts. The sound of the final announcement ricocheted off the thick wooden barricades. No more warnings. Thousands jammed in the streets and they were all shouting, Toro, Toro, Toro. They were all clad in red and white, and they were all doing in unison with rolled up newspapers, copies of Diario de Nevada, the local newspaper, which listed the bulls like horses in the sports section. Hablador, 536 kilos. Tejon, 590. Coalisa, 579. I apologize for my Spanish, it's not very good. We stood in the town square 150 meters from where the bulls' corral was. And we were shoulder to shoulder, and we were swaying along with the momentum of the mob. And my cousin Todd and I just were kind of shuffling in there amongst them. And there were faces staring at us from everywhere, over the tops of barricades, from balconies, from rooftops. And they're just like kind of eager, vulgar faces, you know, just spectators like they're at the circus, clamoring for excitement, death-defying stunts, and some good old-fashioned man versus beast. Two officials held back the mozos. All the people in red and white were called mozos. I thought they were saying bozos for a while, but I was wrong. But those were the runners, and they had a thick rope that held them back, stretched across the street. The first rocket would shoot into the sky, announcing the Bulls' release at 8 a.m. on the dot every morning. They actually did it 8 days in a row, but we'll call it a week today. By 8:05, we would know if we were alive or dead, pretty much. As Hemingway would have said, fiesta or death. So we looked anxiously up at the looming city clock, and my cousin started to remember what a guy from Queens had told us. And he basically told us, stick to the insides, the bulls slide on the wet cobblestones. The cobblestones were always wet in Pamplona. They won't crash into the walls. And if you fall, cover your head and lay there. Better to get trampled than gored. When you get into the arena, go left to right. The bulls obviously don't turn, they just go straight. And lastly, don't touch the bulls. It's considered bad form. You roll up a newspaper and kind of swat at them, okay? Like I needed somebody to tell me not to touch the bulls, really? I mean, come on. So, hey, I said, thanks, Todd. I've got another tip for you. Don't get gored. And then he turned to me, of course, and as my best friend, he said, this isn't some movie, you moron. And I smiled. No, this wasn't a movie. I was going to make one hell of a story back home. My breakfast, one hot cup of coffee, bubbled on my stomach as I waited. Waited to start running, waited to be gored, waited to be spared. Just waiting. And I hate waiting. So this waiting was the worst. Like I imagine, kind of purgatory to be worse than maybe hell. I was just like, damn it, come on. And I thought in my head, maybe our parents were right. So I'm just going to take a little break here and pause in the action. So on the PowerPoint over here, my parents were not very happy with this decision, but they didn't know it until after we had done it. That's always the best thing, right? So, what you see up here were my parents' concerns. Yeah, okay. And you know what? We kind of like, what? And then it turned out they were right. This was something that was the basis and inspiration for me writing about this. It was a man named from University of Illinois named Matthew Tassio, and in 1995 he was gored and killed by a bull. To date, there have been 15 deaths in the ring, not counting in the run, not counting all the different injuries that take place from outside getting gored. So, and as far as the alcohol goes, the concerns were accurate. There was a lot of partying going on. That's me in the center there, and a guy from South Africa, and an unknown man on the ground. And we had no sleeping accommodations for the night. That's my cousin Todd with a bandana there. We don't look like tourists, but we slept during around the flood lamp in the night, and my cousin's jacket actually started to melt to the flood lamp, so he thought it would be good to get off of there. But that was one of the many things that happened to us. So here's the sports section I was talking about. Look at these guys here. Like, there's Hablador. It's like he's posing for the picture. He knows, and the weights there are all in kilos. The average bull weighs about 1 ton, which is a lot. And here's the actual course. It charts where the corral is at the bottom. And that night, after we got off the train, first off the train is just one giant train of people drinking and climbing over. And there are people from Canada, South Africa. The Canadians would always sew Canadian maple leaves on their backpacks so they wouldn't be mistaken as Americans. That was weird. This train was just nuts. And we'd come into this tiny little town like Woodstock was descending on a medieval, castle sort of thing. And it was really cool. You know, we had no place to sleep and very little training. We just had a Rick Steves guidebook for you know, how to run with the bulls, and like it charted out the course. So I'll leave that up as a nice sort of parting shot there. So I'm going to skip ahead to where we actually released the gates. In Pamplona, the original story was San Fermin. He was the patron saint of the city, and we heard like 20 different stories about why they did the running of the bulls, but one of them was he got dragged by the bulls through the streets, and they called it Fiesta de San Fermin, and this was in 1992 that we went. The city was just absolutely crazy. We got kind of the most interesting part of the whole thing was the night before the race when we were charting out and walking the course. We went to see the bulls at the corral, and we didn't think, I didn't think we'd really find them. We went in there and their eyes were glowing at us in the dark, and you know, kind of turning around. It was really a weird moment because they didn't know what was about to happen to them. And suddenly my cousin and I looked at us looking at the bulls in the corral in the darkness, and we could hear them stomping and snorting. And we looked at each other and we said, well, neither do we. So we felt like we were sort of in the same zone there. But anyway, this is, I'm going to start right when the ropes were released. We've only got a couple of minutes here. So the runners in the race, we were told by the Canadians, were like the toughest part. Most of the injuries were from getting trampled or punched or kicked by somebody in the race. So it says the next morning at the rope line, things were getting tense. The toro, toro, toro soon gave way to a more somber chant. Viva San Fermin! Gora San Fermin! Maybe we had upped the ante a little too high this time. After the third chant, the city officials released the rope line and held back the runners. Now those who wanted to could run. About half the runners started up the hill. This is happening. This is really happening, my cousin shouted. The first rocket burst into the sky, signaling that the bulls were starting to repent. Okay, let's go, Todd yelled. Not yet, I want to see him. This is crazy. Come on, let's go. We had 30 seconds tops until the bulls would be into the square. Todd, we came all this way, we might as well. This might be our only chance to see them. My statement was cut off by a second rocket, but the bullpen now was empty. Like a storm surge of red and white, the runners rolled towards us. Behind them, black shapes moved up and down, and we pushed our head away and broke open into the crowd. I got my wish, the bulls. Now, I yelled, and we sprinted upward among the hundreds of other lunatics. The hooves on the cobblestones stood out amongst the cheering and yelling. We're in the middle of a riot. Add to that 6 one-ton bulls, about 8 steers, and you have absolute pandemonium. People shoved each other, threw each other out of the way. A guy fell right in front of Todd, and he leapt over him with one arm outstretched. And every couple of steps, he looked back to make sure I was okay. I was spinning, turning, jumping, and falling bodies just as he was. Behind us, the bulls lunged down like indestructible locomotives, plowing their way forward. We made it past Mercader Street, and I stared up at the Estafada. The Estafada was this one narrow strip where it got really close, and there was no place to hide, so you just had to haul ass up through this thing. Pardon me there. This was no escape until the arena. Todd and I were hunted beasts and fought for any advantage, running an instinct and adrenaline. Once we made it to the top of the street, we were tempted to stop and see if we could see the bulls behind us. And then we saw several runners ahead of us, wide-eyed, pointing right behind us, like, Toro! And so we sprinted through the gate and just hit it hard, and seconds later the bulls came barreling in. They passed us, and it was over. We had made it. Yes, Todd and I hugged each other, high-fived with our arms around each other's shoulders. A stranger came up and took our picture in the plaza. And all around us, thousands of Pamplonians were cheering and yelling from the stands they had been waiting at since dawn. We laughed the laugh of the ignorant and the arrogant. It was short-lived. Look, I prodded at Todd, pointing at the entrance. A couple of these big burly guys were lifting a wedge back over the closed doors, locking us in. What the hell? How are we supposed to get out, Todd panicked. We watched a couple of tourists try and climb out of the ring, but they were staunchly met by the locals who shoved them back. Seriously, Todd, what's going on? Are the bulls still in here? Yeah, they sure are. Todd, I can't see them. Where are they? Todd shouted, get on the wall, now! And the crowd separated about 20 feet from us, newspapers flying in the air. The bulls were coming. I made this whole day, I made it only to die after the finish line. Todd jumped in the back of someone clinging to the wall, and I leapfrogged right next to him onto a sweaty, bald, middle-aged Spaniard. The bull change course was now galloping full speed around the wall toward my backside, which is where many of the injuries take place. Paper thin, I thought to myself. I inhaled and closed my eyes and waited. I felt the beast as it passed inches behind me. The sheer velocity of the bull pulled me to the ground. As I fell backward, I pulled Senor Sweaty onto the floor of the arena with me. I lay there stunned until a hand offered its assistance and I was hoisted to my feet. The Spaniard, whose name I never learned, grinned, looked me in the eyes and said, "Cool, man, cool." High fives all around. "You okay?" Todd asked. I think so, I replied. "Let me find my pulse." The final rockets fired overhead, signaling the bulls were out of the bends and the race was over. Doors opened and we walked out. Later that night, each night of the fiesta, there would be a bullfight. Inevitably, the bulls would be killed. Leaving the arena, one street led to another until we arrived at the back of the train station. We picked up our bags, which felt like life jackets. We would have clean underwear for the first time in days. Later that day, the party train pulled out of Pamplona, silent, listless survivors drifting in and out of sleep. When you're the only one awake, you tend to have profound thoughts. I became acutely aware at that moment that something had shifted in me. Sometimes in life, you're blessed with that moment in time to appreciate that moment. But you know what I'm talking about. In a few short weeks, Todd would be heading back to UW graduate school. And I would be heading back to the vague and unemployment market of the early 90s. For me, it was the most memorable of many trips. For Todd, it was his last time abroad. Looking back, that was the only time in my life that I felt truly free. 3 months riding the rails, no one to account for, no phones, no technology, no one judging us. This is what cool place or thing we wanted to tackle next. Just two friends standing every couple mornings at the famous train stations of Europe, looking at the cities and departure times. Pamplona was the epitome of that freedom, the privilege of youth to risk it all for something unworthy of the risk. Sure, it was stupid, but someday sitting around the fire with my grandkids or my nieces or my sons, I'll have a story to tell. We were lucky to have survived, but more importantly, we were lucky to have had the freedom to